In round 3 of the Mitropa Cup, both the favourites won their matches. Austria defeated Slovakia 3-1 and Germany defeated Hungary 3-1, both very convincing matches. So Austria's still in the lead with 6 points, Germany just behind on 5 points, and there's a bit of a gap between them and the other teams. But I'm not going to pick a game from one of those matches. I've selected a game between Wojtek Rojicek and Lucas di Nicolantonio from the Czech Republic against France match. And, well, you'll soon see why I've selected this game. So, Rojicek with the white pieces, and it's another Slav. Now, here, instead of playing e3, and possibly d takes c4, and, well, it's the Moran variation, white plays bishop g5. Now, white has to be prepared for all kinds of different systems when playing bishop g5. For example, black could play the super sharp Botvinnik variation with b5, and then here, and g5, knight g5, and so on. Or black could play more calmly, bishop e7, leading to an orthodox Queen's Gambit declined. Or black could play knight d7 and queen a5, the so-called Cambridge Springs variation. So you really need to know your stuff when you play bishop g5. Black played h6. Now, very often white simply exchanges on f6, slightly misplacing the queen. Not a bad variation for white, but here, well, white wants to play far more sharply and played bishop h4. And this is a gambit continuation. Of course, black can still go into a kind of Queen's Gambit decline with bishop e7. But black picked up the gauntlet and took on c4. After this, g5. Black is able to hold on to this pawn, but of course in taking this gambit pawn, black has had to advance on the g5, also advance on the king side with g5, which of course really compromises his position on that side of the board. But, well, it's a big pawn clump on this side of the board. So, very sharp continuation over the past 10 years or so, an extremely popular continuation at the highest levels. Anand is a great exponent of this line, with white and black actually. And here the most popular moves are castles or h4 for white. But very quickly Rojicek played e5. So the knight comes into d5. I mean, this looks, I don't know, e5 to me looks slightly illogical because it rather blocks the bishop and allows black's knight into d5. But nevertheless, this is still a very sharp position, and white still gains very interesting attacking chances, as we're about to see. White castled. And in fact, this has been played, for example, by Morozevich before, and many other strong players, so it has a reasonable reputation. And curiously enough, the player of the black pieces here, Di Nicolantonio, has had this with black before and got absolutely crushed. In that previous game, he played knight d7 here, which to my eyes looks like a very logical move. In fact, it was played by Caruana against Morozevich. But he lost, but our player here, Nicolantonio, lost very quickly. And today he played, well, after 7 minutes thought, knight takes c3. Perhaps he was a little bit surprised at this turn of events, with white repeating this variation. And now I would anticipate a move like knight d7 again, just starting to bring some pieces out. But instead, here black played, after very little thought, c5. Well, of course, in principle, this is a very nice move to make, opening up the diagonal of the bishop. But it is a destabilizing move, because you can see that this pawn on b5 is now vulnerable. And black's development isn't very good. So from a practical point of view, well, as I said, it just destabilizes black's position I don't think it's a bad move, objectively, but still, I think it's just becomes more difficult for black to play. So already, white is able to start attacking this queenside position, and that's dangerous for black when his king is still in the middle and white's king is beautifully safe, tucked away at the side of the board. Well, clearly this one shouldn't be taken because of c4. c4 is en prise, so a6 and queen b1 is a very nice kind of move, typical of this kind of position. Just looking at that pawn on b5, but also with another idea in mind, that this capture is sometimes possible because of the pin. So black has to react here quite vigorously, and he did so with g4, pushing away the knight to the side of the board. And his idea was to take on d4, but it was probably better here to play bishop e7. Now, it starts to get very complicated here, but basically if white just starts taking these pawns on the queen side, white probably has enough here. Black, I think, has to give back this piece. And the position, I think, is about equal. But c takes d4 is, well, chancing it, I would say. I mean, perhaps black underestimated this move, bishop takes c4. So clearly that would be pretty disastrous if black took there. I think, well, black's position looks like a wreck now. So black, after 35 minutes, played queen c8. I think that was a realisation that things were not going too well at this point. You can see black's position is just so ragged. I mean, you know, this advanced g-pawn, the b5 pawn under fire, the king's still in the middle, no development to speak of. It's a perilous situation, but black is, for the moment, a nice pawn up, this pawn on c3. And I would say the last chance is to play knight d7 here, just to try and get some pieces out. But in practical terms, very difficult position for black. a5 was played, and this was met with a beautiful move. After almost 20 minutes thought, white came up with knight g6. Wonderful move. Well, if this isn't taken, if the rook moves, then I suppose at the very least white can just take on f8, and without that bishop, black's position is pretty ragged. I mean, maybe there's better, but it's pretty horrible. In any case, black took. So the king is now running around in the middle of the board. It's not in a happy place. If bishop d5, which one would like to play, then white just hammers away at that bishop, will exchange on d5 and break through to the king. Instead, knight d7 happened. Queen a2, good move, looking at the pawn on e6. And there's no really good way to defend that pawn. Remember, the king can't really sneak out here. Well, it definitely can't sneak out there because of bishop h4 and mate. So black played bishop d5, and white's play here was admirably straightforward. He's a piece down, but hey, let's just give up an exchange, and now white is a whole rook down, but all his pieces are playing here. These bishops look fantastic. The rook can join in the attack. This pawn is going to advance. Black can't move the queen up to try and drive white's queen back because the rook is en prise in the corner. So, not surprisingly, black tried rook a7, but now white's initiative just flows. So the rook has to move. Now I'm sure there must be lots of good moves here, but e6, again, white just advances, and that opens up this bishop. Just look at the difference between the two kings. It's horrible. You know, this one is potentially coming in here. You can take on d7. It's all pretty bad. Black took on b6, white took one piece back and started checking, and the queen combined with the bishops and the rook are just deadly, absolutely deadly. If king e7, bishop h4 check will lead to mate. Queen c8 was played, the rook comes into play, and you can do this all with checks. This is the great thing. So queen nudges back, and now bishop h4. That was pretty good time before as well. And the king starts running. If the king comes back, then that is very nasty. Or king b7, rook b1 check. I mean, it's terribly simple actually. Black played rook b6, but bishop g3 check was the end of the game. Black resigned here. If king c6, bishop e4, for example, is mate, or king b7 check, and rook b1, etc., and mate, next move. Well, a brutal game, but again, it just shows what happens if you're a little bit casual with your king position. By the way, I should mention that in the women's section, Hungary are still in the lead, but they only drew their match today, but Hungary's still in the lead with 5 points, and then there's several teams together on 4 points just behind. Thanks for watching.